Welcome to our third community engagement and learning session, Dispelling Myths, the homelessness edition, folks. Today in this session, please be mindful that we're going to go a little bit cheeky and profound with this. We're also going to, of course, get you some facts in there so that we can actually dispel some of the myths that we have with amongst our homeless serving sector, etc. Okay. Throughout this, if you guys have any myths that you want or questions you have, there'll be lots of time at the end of the presentation. So please ask away. We encourage you to ask those questions that are maybe a little bit uncomfortable or, hey, we've heard this, is this true? Please make space to ask those questions. It's really important that we actually know what is being said so that we can adequately respond to it. So first and foremost, we acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 7 and neighbor to Treaty 4 territory, traditional lands of the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Stoney Nakoda, Tsunitsa, as well as the Cree, Sioux, and the Saulteaux bands of the Ojibwa peoples. And we also honor acknowledge that we are on the homelands of Métis Nation within Region 3. So we have a list of 10 myths for you folks. And here we go. Myth number 1. It is their fault they are homeless. When you see quotations up in the corners, this is actually just a really quick snippet of what we hear on a constant basis. Being homeless is a choice. Make better choices, people. Just make better choices. The myth is dangerous, and it allows people to ignore the trauma of homelessness and the neurological effects trauma has on humans. All of us have experienced trauma at some point. So being homeless is stressful, it is absolutely exhausting, and it is a hard day-to-day existence for adults and children. We often forget about the children and the families of those experiencing homelessness. It is exhausting, and it is no one's fault when they enter into a state of homelessness. People do not wake up one day and say, today I will aspire to be homeless. I have never seen that on a kindergarten picture in my life, and neither have you. Nobody aspires to be homeless. People who experience homelessness are not distinct and separate from the rest of us. Oh, sorry, folks, we have a little glitch there. So they're not different than us. In fact, the line between being housed and unhoused is quite fluid. In general, the pathways into and out of homelessness are neither linear nor uniform. Individuals and families who experience homelessness may not share much in common with each other, aside from the fact that they simply lack adequate housing, and sometimes the income necessary to support and ensure that they maintain their housing stability. That's it. The causes of homelessness reflect an intricate interplay between structural factors, system failures, and individual circumstances. Homelessness is usually the result of the cumulative impact of a number of factors, many outside the control of individuals rather than one single cause. So it's not that event that led to that state of homelessness all the time. Sometimes it's the accumulation of that, and that's just kind of the breaking point. So when we look at factors, we have to look at things like structural factors, economic and societal issues that affect opportunities and social environments for all individuals. Adequate income, access to affordable housing, if there's affordable housing available, health supports, and the experience of discrimination. Stigma and discrimination, when we look at people of non-Caucasian or non-European descent, and their experiences with getting housing, with accessing jobs, with being promoted. Welcome to structural factors. Poverty, we talk a lot about poverty and the impact of that. People in poverty can't pay for the basic needs. Healthcare, childcare, etc. Living in poverty means a person is one illness away, one family trauma away, one trigger away, one paycheck away from experiencing homelessness. Not all the time. If you want to talk about people that are fantastic at budgeting, look at those experiencing poverty. They know how to manage what money they don't have. So massive shifts in policy and practice are needed at the local, provincial, and federal front to reduce the experience of poverty throughout the country. It's not a Medicine Hat issue, it is a Canada-wide issue. Housing, critical shortage of affordable housing and appropriate housing available for people. we have a lot of people that are in core housing needs, which means they pay more than 30% and sometimes more than half of their income on just maintaining housing stability. System failure. When other systems of care absolutely fail the individual or the family. When the systems fail, they have to go to another system, and they tend to go into the homeless serving system. So most of the time, other mainstream services could have actually prevented the need for any homeless serving interaction if those services were provided. So transitions from child welfare are examples, inadequate discharge planning for people leaving hospital and corrections and mental health and addiction facilities, and the lack of support for immigrants and refugees, lack of support on Indigenous reserves and Métis settlements. When people come in to community, that's because systems are failing. Personal circumstances and relational problems. So individual and relational factors apply to really the personal circumstances of any of us. It can include like traumatic events, so a house fire, job loss, personal crisis, so a family breakup or family violence, which is exceptionally high, not just in our community, but across Canada right now, is really perpetuated by the COVID-19 response and families having to stay in their own homes. Mental health and addiction challenges, including brain injury and acquired brain injury as well. It can be both a cause and a consequence of homelessness, and physical health problems are another thing that we don't talk about. Here's a little known tidbit. 69% of the people we serve report a physical health condition. It is tough to be homeless. It is exhausting. Domestic violence, I talked a little bit about this. Family violence increases drastically. So yes, people might have the security of tenure of a home, but they don't have the safety of that home. Seniors also experience this when we have elder abuse going on as well. So really simplified summary version of those factors that contribute to homelessness. So when you have job loss, people will always deduce it to its lowest common denominator, going, make better choices at your job. Or sometimes the absence of good choices is the problem. And sometimes it's those societal factors that actually prevent that from happening. So there's a lot of research available online about the causes of homelessness and how people get into that state. So you can actually look at that. I know Dominique's going to put it in the chat as well. The second myth that we're going to talk about, this is probably it's not my favorite actually. Homeless people are lazy and don't want to work. So just get a job and you'll be fine. And don't be lazy. So many people who experience homelessness are constantly in search of the very basic necessities of life, such as food, shelter, and sources of income. So due to barriers that they face, many people do not have the option of being lazy. Just a different way to look at that. Do you know how long you have to stand in lines to actually see someone, or how long you have to wait on the phone to actually talk to your caseworker? It can be an hour and a half wait just to get through to your income support worker. So it's not about being lazy. It's about things not being maybe operating as effectively as they could be. So actively and constantly looking for what is needed for survival is a lot of work, folks, especially when access to resources such as transportation, technology, and support is quite limited. So when we talk about just get a job, here's a little known fact. Did you know that 7% of the people that we serve in our homeless serving system are already employed when they come to our door? 7%. 3% are receiving employment insurance, which means that at some point they were employed. 13% are recipients of an AISH benefit, so they actually do have stable income. 40% are on income support or some type of Alberta work support. So again, they have a core shelter or housing benefit. 8% have other type of income such as CPP or disability. And only 30% show up at our door with no income. And that could be immediate job loss or family breakdown or the splitting or just new to community and just not on their feet yet. Only 30%. Some other things to think about when people are lazy and really just don't want to get a job is look at the number of layoffs we've had over the last year. Look at when the oil prices go down and crash. So it's sometimes not the lack of want to get meaningful employment, it's there are no jobs available. So we have an individual staying in a shelter with no fixed address and access, limited time for phone, etc. And then we have someone that has previously been in the oil field. Where do we think those jobs are going to go? So it's not just about the lack of availability of jobs. Sometimes it's a competitive world right now. And yes, there's a lot of agencies and organizations and businesses in town that are hiring right now. And most of our individuals are very fortunate to get opportunity. Sometimes securing it and sustaining that job are very different things when you need other supports to make sure that you maintain your employment. So if getting out of the state of homelessness was simply as simple as just, hey, get a job, someone needs to explain why, 70% of the people that we serve do have income and why it's not working. I'm so confused. Number 3, how's everyone doing so far? Now we're gonna have some fun, ready? Number 3, this may be the most profound information that you received today. This, folks, is the new trajectory of criminality that we have put together based on 15 years of complete anecdotal evidence from keyboard warriors. Are you ready? Homeless people, I can't even keep a straight face. Homeless people are dangerous and violent criminals. Trajectory of criminality. You've seen it here first. 1, people are housed in law-abiding citizens. 2, people lose their housing. Now, this is where things get really interesting, folks. We don't know what the hell happens during this phase, but there seems to be something going on when people lose their housing. And this next point, because this is what we're hearing happens. Everyone who loses their housing gets exceptionally violent and turn into dangerous criminals. You're welcome. This is actually what we hear. This is the narrative. That's it. So you're welcome. That concludes our presentation. It does not. So a person who is homeless is no more likely to be a criminal than a person who is housed. Now, there's one exception. The exception is public bylaws and bylaws around public behavior. So people who are homeless break certain bylaws just because they're not housed. So loitering, sleeping rough, panhandling, urinating or defecating in public spaces as well, because they don't have a house. Now I'm going to give you something to pair that up against. Think of it as no different than a person without a vehicle is probably not going to get a speeding ticket. Someone that is housed is probably not going to get a bylaw infraction because they're sleeping outside. Think of it that way. And furthermore, those experiencing homelessness are far more likely to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators. A study done by the Institute for Prevention of Crime found that compared to the house, homeless people have more often become the victims of physical and sexual abuse as children and victims of family violence and spousal assaults as adults. Those without adequate shelter are more likely than those housed to be victims of violence, and for women, victims of sexual assault. And across the board, they are more likely to be Indigenous. Now, that is not to say that some people without housing are not engaging in criminal or illegal activity. They are. There are some. The issue is when we define a population or an attribute based on economic stability, such as housing, as a statement of fact for the entire population. That is stigmatizing And that is discriminatory, folks. Any questions on this slide? Don't worry, it gets better. Now let's talk mental health. So in our slides, we'll use mental illness for impact. And well, this is what we hear. There is a common perception that people who experience homelessness are mentally ill. So which one of these statements are true? We've gone through the work of deducing this statement to get it into more realistic kind of language and, you know, things that we all might be thinking or hearing or. So I want you to, there's no voting, sorry guys. Homeless people are mentally ill. Homeless equals mentally ill. Lack of permanent housing equals mental illness. Or I lost my job in my home equals mental illness. So which one of those statements is true? Those experiencing homelessness are no more susceptible to poor mental health compared to the general population. The stressful environment and the conditions and the difficult situations that homeless individuals experience daily can trigger mental illness or aggravate existing conditions. However, for some, compromised mental health can also precede the onset of homelessness. It is important to note that not all homeless individuals have mental illness or concurrent disorders. And not all people who experience mental health issues are homeless or ever at risk of homelessness. Much like criminality, there are people who experience mental health conditions when they first come into our programs and services. Some are very manageable and some are really debilitating, like we all experience. In Medicine Hat, 69% of those we serve through our Housing First programs, I'm going to give you the number because sometimes 69% doesn't give you the volume, 683 of the 995 people, adults we've served, report a mental health condition. 69%. In our community, we have a number of individuals that are experiencing homelessness and who are struggling significantly with their mental wellness, seriously struggling with their mental wellness. We know who they are. Mental health supports know who they are. Police know who they are. We know their behaviors, their words, and their demeanor that can sometimes be really alarming and frightening. What we challenge people to do is see the individual and keep insisting on supports for their well-being and for the community's well-being. Sometimes systems don't operate in a way, and we like to really meet people where they are at. So just because they are having a, I'm going to say an episode or showing behaviors that maybe you or I are not familiar with, doesn't mean that we can just pick them up and put them away. That's not good community support, and that's not good support of mental illness. Know that those systems are really trying. We don't give up on people. We have a mental health crisis, not just in our community, that impacts all individuals, regardless of their housing situation. Imagine having the unfortunate state of having your mental health perpetuated on a public stage. Number 5, folks, homeless people are drug using, substance abusing drunks. So there is a common perception that people who experience homelessness are drug addicts and alcoholics. Guess what we're doing again? Guess which one of these is true? Homeless people are addicts. Homeless equals addict. I feel like I'm in kindergarten where it says like apple, and then we kind of got to match it to something, or like banana, and this is what we get to deal with on a day-to-day, folks. Lack of permanent housing equals addiction. Lost my spouse, my job, and my home equals addiction. That is the linear thinking we get to deal with on a day-to-day basis, because saying homeless people are addicts is really easy when you don't see the person or the context of someone's homelessness. So there are many, many people who experience homelessness that don't struggle with substance abuse or addiction. Similar to the general population, only a percentage of those who are experiencing homelessness struggle with addiction. People experiencing homelessness may deal with other issues related to their experience of homelessness, including trauma, mental health issues, and challenges with their overall well-being. 43% of the people in our programs reported and self-report that they have substance abuse issues. Now, I'm going to ask you, which came first? The lovely way that we experience people, or that people experiencing homelessness in our community are treated and talked about and have things thrown at them when they are walking down the street. So what comes first? The behavior or the challenge? And sometimes they coincide and sometimes they don't. But until someone can actually go, was there something preceding a certain behavior or not? It's challenging. And at the end of the day, it all goes back to trauma of some sort. So see the person, not the behavior or the addiction. Very important that to recognize that those individuals experiencing homelessness that do struggle with substance abuse issues or addiction are not any less deserving of the basic necessities of their life. That is where we need to start. Housing and supporting people. Supports are in place to address the needs of individuals once they are housed. And we've seen in our community such a good uptick and uptake on mental health and addiction support outreach. It is phenomenal in this community. I can't wait to see where that goes to actually really support individuals. All right. Programs give people drugs and alcohol and tell them actually where to go to buy them. Programs encourage substance abuse and behavioral problems. So this is like, careful what you're getting spoon-fed, people. So harm reduction is a foundational principle of all programs in Medicine's system of care. So harm reduction is built on the pillars of respect, acceptance, empowerment, compassion, and collaboration. And the idea of minimizing as much possible as the negative consequences of risky behaviors. Put more simply, we recognize and understand that people make choices for themselves. And those choices sometimes include taking part in behaviors that can cause harm to varying degrees. So whether that be in sex trade or alcohol or drug use or overeating, it's really varying degrees of addiction. So our goal is to minimize the negative consequences of people's choices sometimes, and hopefully lead them onto more recovery-based ideas and access to those supports. But in the absence of, geez, if only people did what we said. No, people make choices and people are allowed to make choices. We are what's called non-compliance based, meaning we do not require people to fit into our little mold of what some person somewhere behind a desk thinks they need to be boxed in to go, you need to meet these criteria to be worthy of being housed. No, it's come as you are. We'll get you housed and supported, and then we'll work on your goals, whatever that looks like for you. So no, we don't buy drugs for people. Yes, we absolutely give out harm reduction supplies and absolutely will continue to do that because it minimizes risks and it's a good time to have a conversation with people. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to celebrate. We are giving away housing for everyone. It is free. No, it's not. Come before we all run out. We're out. So this is something we hear often is, why are you just giving housing away for free? And, why are you paying everyone's rent? And how does that work? So I'm going to talk, the next two slides kind of go together. This is myth 8. This was a fun one. Maybe we should, I don't know. But accountability is built into our entire system of care here in Medicine Hat, which means that people are actually required to pay the rent. So within our Housing First programs and our system of care and all the programs, people have, as much as we're non-compliance based, there's still rules. So non-compliance based is around certain elements, but we still have program criteria. That means people have to contribute to their rent. So if someone's getting, say, Alberta supports or, maybe have a core shelter amount, they have to contribute that amount to their rent. Now, when we talk about system stuff, and for those that have engaged before, is you let me know if you find a place that you can rent for $330 a month that is habitable. Probably not, folks, unless it's maybe shared accommodation, which is great. So how our programs operate is built within all of our programs. We do offer within the programming the ability to pay for ongoing rental costs, because $330 is not cutting it. So in the absence of us topping up rents through a rent supplement through our homeless serving programs, people are not going to get housed. It's expensive to pay rent, and as things go up and up, that's a problem. So no, we don't give housing for free. People do get a choice in where they live, but it needs to be affordable for what their income that they're bringing in, whatever that looks like, whether that's from bottle picking or binning, or from street work, or from receiving an H benefit, or for their full-time job. It has to be congruent with what that is. So we do not give away free housing. We do not pay for everyone's rent. Now, when people are first getting housed, the goal of the program is to actually get them connected to adequate supports and services and budget with people. Again, you want to see good budgeters, go to people that don't have much money to budget, because they need to meet their basic needs sometimes. Oh, the homeless serving program has a really long wait list. Why? Probably because we're too busy ending homelessness. No, we don't have, we have one person on our wait list for Housing First. Literally, if someone that is experiencing homelessness comes in, we can get them connected to a program and support immediately. They come through a process, they go through our coordinated access system. So no, when we talk about social and affordable housing, yes, there is a very long wait list for social and affordable housing. That is not within our homeless serving system. That is very different. That is place-based housing. That is rent supplement from the other side of the organization for the housing management body component. So something you can do is, like, when people say there's a long wait list, I'm on the wait list, it's ask if they're talking about social housing or the homeless serving sector. If they're talking about the homeless serving sector, no, they're actually probably talking about the social housing component of it, because again, it's about housing availability, and there is a long wait list. There absolutely is a long wait list, because when people are in social housing, they tend to stay in social housing for whatever reason. We also hear things like, they won't help me and they evicted me. Yes, we do evict people. So again, if you're not paying your rent, you don't get to just stay for free. And when you're in community, if you're not paying your rent, you also don't get to live there for free either. So yeah, so that kind of goes hand in hand, and that falls under the Residential Tenancy Act. When you hear people say they won't help me, something good that people can say is, have you been helped before? And what kind of went amiss? We get this complaint a lot is, yeah, but I did everything, and we're going, but did you pay, it's usually around, did you pay your rent? And people go, well, no. Going, you can't live in a place if you're not paying your rent. It just goes hand in hand. Or if you're not engaging with case management. That's the other criteria that we have, is when people are agreeing to participate in program, they're really agreeing to two things. One, you got to meet with your caseworker, and two, you got to pay your rent. You actually have to pay your rent to live there, and you have to be respectful. So people get evicted. We even evict people as well if they are doing significant damage, if they're having guest management issues, if they are using dealing drugs. Those are things that are actually not permitted anywhere. You can't deal drugs. That's illegal. Now, this is where people go, but I thought you said yes, we're non-compliance-based recovery focused. People cannot actively deal drugs off of balconies and in drive-through places. If people are choosing to use, that is a little bit different. And people have a hard time going, well, but I thought you said, yeah, I'm saying both. They can't actively engage in illegal activity and expose others to that. If they choose to use and utilize in their own private dwelling, that is different. Why do I still see homeless people? So medicine hat, myth number 9, medicine hat has ended homelessness. So no one will ever experience homeless again. No. So ending homelessness has less to do with the number of people that are actively experiencing homelessness and more to do with having an effective and sustainable system of care in place. So we've developed a robust system of care that enables individuals that are experiencing homelessness to get access to housing and supports needed to exit that state of homelessness. So I'm going to try to emulate the next picture, because this is the one that we all agreed summed it up, because I think I actually look like this when I hear this question, because at this juncture I go, this one always baffles me, folks. And it baffles me for a couple different reasons. One, people never read the second tagline. And two, what does a homeless person look like? And what do they sound like? And how do you know they're homeless? More times than not, when I'm walking with people downtown and we're doing activities and, you know, learning and talking, it's well, that person's homeless. And I'm like, well, let's go say hi. So we say hi, and sometimes we get told where to go and how to get there. But the next question is like, oh, do you have somewhere to stay tonight? And they're like, well, yeah, I'm just hanging out. Like, can I sit in the park? And sometimes people will also say, oh, actually, I don't have somewhere to go tonight. And then we give resources and stuff. So don't make the assumption. If you see someone, I know our trio that has their carts and stuff like that, do not make assumptions about who is experiencing homelessness in our community. They might be your biggest donor. So you never know. And I say that and for those of you who know what I'm talking about, and it's not a behind the scenes, but we have some very philanthropic people that maybe don't fit our mold again of what we think a philanthropist should be, that are maybe accessing services that we provide because they like the people. Yeah, but I think this face about sums it up, because it keeps on coming up, and I'm like, yeah. Then we get into, why do you say end? I'm going to give this example. Why do you say end homelessness? Well, because I think we can. I think we can actually end the people's experience of homelessness, where it doesn't need to be a constant state for anyone. I think we should be ending a lot of things. We should be ending discrimination, not just lowering it. You know, let's try to reduce the stigma that people experience. Let's try to reduce the aggressive, violent nature of, you know, family violence, and we should be ending things as a group of social human beings. We should be striving to end things. I'm not good enough is not good enough in my world to simply reduce and have that little tiny benchmark of let's just reduce it by 10%. No, go all in or go all out. Myth 10, nothing I can do about homelessness. Yeah, there's a lot you can do about homelessness. I'm going to just list off a couple things, and I'm going to open it to Q&A, because people love to ask questions about other myths that they've heard, or how does that work? Things you can do: be kind to those that are maybe experiencing homelessness. And really ask what you can do to help. Ask what you can do. The service providers, you guys learned about service providers, say, how can I help with that? Kindness, unfortunately, is becoming a rare commodity, and is a rare commodity and currency for those that are not housed. So a smile and a simple act of kindness is enough to get someone to open up and go, oh, that wasn't a bad experience. Maybe I could go into that place or the building, or, you know, it's just simple acts of kindness. Speak up. Homelessness is a complex challenge rooted in many social injustices. So in order to end homelessness, we have to advocate for person-centered, trauma-informed supports that meet people where they're at in their life, not our lives, their lives. If homelessness is not an issue that you feel comfortable speaking about, there's so many other social issues that contribute to homelessness that you can actually speak up about. Talk about discrimination based on sexuality, on gender, on race. Talk about the lack of affordable housing and employment options in our community, our meaningful daily activity. So you don't need to be a spokesperson for homelessness. Talk about those other things. It all impacts that. Talk about creating sustainable employment or volunteer opportunities in our community. Hire people or rent to them. People experiencing, and families, not just individuals, but people experiencing families and they're experiencing homelessness are regularly in need of housing and work opportunities. So they're diverse as the general public in their needs, experience, drive, and skills, and should be given the same opportunities that are available to individuals and families that are housed. So look beyond their housing status and look at the skill set of individuals. And it's interesting, and we try not to do this, but I have been so in awe when you actually sit and talk to those experiencing homeless or that have gone through housing instability struggles in their life about their aptitude to take a skill set that they have and apply it to other areas. It is remarkable. It is creative. It is ingenuity at its best. Talk about being a good entrepreneur. If you can apply those skill sets because you need to survive, amazing attribute, folks, amazing. Homelessness cannot be solved. So we already know where Jaime stands on this one. Yes, it can. It's a solvable social issue. You house people. To solve homelessness, you house people. One of the first steps is to actually understand what it means to be homeless. And we separate this out a little bit. Being homeless is without a roof or shelter. Being homeless and looking at homelessness is more about that intrinsic underlying issues that people are having. That's where we get into the trauma and really get into that. So we can say solving homelessness is easy because you just house people. But what about those underlying issues that perpetuate people into that cycle and trigger response of losing their housing and losing their housing? It's easy for us to house people. It is actually difficult for us to keep them housed and support them to stay housed because of all these other things that are going on. Debunk myths about homelessness. And cannot stress this enough for people. If you don't know, ask. What applies to one person and one person's experience doesn't apply to everyone, because what you don't know is we have access to data and information, and not just what someone's telling us, but we have a lot of information typically about the individual and how they're experiencing homelessness. So there's like, nobody's housing me, going, but you didn't show up to the last 15 housing viewings. And folks, we actually have this happen where it's nobody's helping. Okay, but you didn't show up to your viewings, or you forgot to sign your lease agreement, but you didn't pay your rent. So no, you can't stay there. So they'll cycle back in. So that's the benefit of having a really good system of care, is that the system actually talks. And so when they say, well, you didn't, why aren't you guys doing this? We can go, well, actually, and it's not about putting the onus of responsibility on that individual, because they might have had a lot of stuff come up, and that's okay. But it's about that system understanding and working together to go, okay, so if you're not good at appointments, maybe when we just see you, we can go on the fly and do things. So it's about being really versatile and being really flexible in how we approach things and how we do that. So eliminating homelessness, really, to the point where there is not one single person ever experiencing homelessness again, would take a complete breakdown and rebuild of our system. It will. And that's just not at the local level, that's at a provincial level and a national level as well. It doesn't mean we need to throw out all those systems as we're rebuilding it, because when we look at policy, again, $330, you can't pay your rent. And looking at those things, employment opportunities, meaningful daily activity. So a lot of the things I talked about actually have nothing to do with housing people. It's about those other peripheral systems of care, but it always comes onto the homelessness table for some reason. So when we're seeing, so just be really mindful of that when you're like, it's a homeless individual, but it's like, is there mental health or is there maybe substance use impacting their ability to actually fully engage into having a housing conversation? Or are they just struggling right now? And what does that look like for that individual? All right, folks. I am totally open to questions. They can be serious questions. They can be, have you ever heard questions? I'm going to actually move my screen down a little bit here. And really invite you to go, anything you've heard about people experiencing homelessness, perceptions, or I heard that are always fun ones to answer. I will start this off. One of the things that people ask me is, will you guys just take your administration and just use it for bonuses? No. That's about as simple as I can do that, but it's something that someone actually came up and asked, which I appreciate. It's like, no, this is how much we get in terms of administration for our provincial funds and our federal funds. So I'm going to end the slideshow now, or attempt to end the slideshow now. So we have about 15 minutes for questions or comments from folks, and I really do encourage you to ask away, or to, you know, do you have thoughts about other things? Lay it on today.
Jamie, what's the best answer that you can give to someone who says things like, well, I thought you ended homelessness?
I just stare them down. Nope. No.
I know, but I'm just thinking like I hear that too, and I always try to you know, hear Jamie's voice in my head about, you know, we actually, when you think about homelessness, a lot of the people that you're talking about may be housed, yada yada. But like, so what would be a really good standard answer that we could provide?
So my standard answer is just always based in facts. So what I say is, so yes, based on our national definition of what it means to end homelessness, chronic homelessness, that threshold has been achieved. It doesn't mean that people won't experience homelessness in our community. And in fact, we do still have people experiencing homelessness in our community. So ending homelessness is about a system response that state of homelessness is brief and non-recurring for people. So it's around saying, like, I'm trying to find a really good analogy to use, but it's the second sentence of the headline. Because people will see that top headline, encourage them to read the second part and give them information going, yeah, that's what it says, and this is what it means.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, Jolynn. Sorry, I'm terrible at looking at people's hands up.
Hi, Jamie. Hi, everyone. I want to educate myself about one thing. Is there a place in town near the shelter, at the shelter, where folks can stash their belongings during the daytime while they go about their activities, their appointments and things? I heard that from a client recently who's cycling back to the beginning of connecting with Housing Link. And, you know, she says it's just tough to get places, you know, because they have to stay in one spot with their stuff to guard it.
Mm-hmm. So I know that we have some service providers that can actually answer this, so I'm going to turn it over to them. They are not answering today. Colette, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Oh, is Colette there or no? Okay, so I'm gonna maybe Colette's offline here. So there is not, and this is a fine balance, folks. So we want individuals to gauge and get housed as quickly as possible. So there's a fine balance of not being enabling, but also supporting individuals. So on some occurrences, they can keep them at the shelter if they are there and actively working. The challenges with people's belongings is that it's their personal belongings and typically they don't want to leave them unaccounted for. So for those that are having to pack their own personal belongings around, that's why you have people with shopping carts and stuff like that, is they still have personal belongings. So sometimes they were permitted to leave them at the Champion Center at the time, or now the Mustard Seed. And I think that might be going in terms of people being able to stash some stuff. Ideally, we want them to get housed as quickly as possible so that they don't have to be lugging their stuff around. Other questions?
Amy, it's Lee. I'll pitch one back to you in your cheeky tone, because I think I know some of the answer, but I think it's one that deserves some discussion. So here's my cheeky tone. So, and I'm assuming this is a myth, I hear all downtown business owners hate homeless people.
So they, no, just kidding. No, absolutely not. We have such phenomenal support from our business community and our really private business sector as well. There is such amazing support for our vulnerable populations. So what we are experiencing is maybe a couple businesses, not just businesses. I'm gonna do this a little bit. Individuals that are directly impacted or that have been impacted or not happy with or not in agreement with approaches for individuals that are experiencing homelessness. The number of businesses that are not supportive is quite minimal. It is very minimal. And I think that's part of the good work in community and really understanding. So I think much like it is with other elements, you have a couple individuals that are maybe have a lot of airtime and are very loud and maybe aggressive with some language that kind of perpetuates this and blows things up. And it's not that their concerns are not valid. They might just be really involved and not complete, I will say. So there's always some merit when people have a concern. There's always merit to that. But it's the degree of the merit and how actually profound that impact or situation is. We have amazing business community support in this community. So it's like us saying like all businesses are not supportive. That would be a terrible myth. It's quite the reverse, actually.
I appreciate that response. I think sometimes too many groups are painted with a single brush. So that credit and recognition is important. And I think as well, the credit and recognition of yourself and other service providers to curry those positive relationships as well. So thanks for letting me have the opportunity to have that myth busted.
You're welcome.
Jamie, I have a question, and it actually came from my kids because I was telling them about some of the things that we've been discussing the last 3 weeks. And the one question was, what type of rules are there for individuals that utilize that type of housing? And are there rules that they need to follow?
Which type of housing do you?
It was for the homelessness.
Okay, so like, is it like the shelter or like permanent supportive housing or market housing or?
Well, I guess
Sorry, I'm not being difficult. It's very different.
No,
actually. Yeah.
No, I guess that's actually really good to clarify. I didn't have specific, or they didn't have specific. What I'm hearing from that question is there's probably different rules depending on which housing you're in.
Yes, I'll give a general answer. So for individuals that are maybe just recently housed, minimal rules actually. So it's no different than, I would probably put this back, it's no different than your children at your house. Is that the same rules apply? So as parents, I'm going to say not as children, because that would be terrible rule delivery and many different things. So within our programs, we follow the Residential Tenancy Act with all of our programs and housing services. Individuals have their own lease agreement with their own landlord. Programs I'm going to go into permanent supportive housing here actually. So it's the same rules. So nobody can come into your home and tell you you can't have a drink or that you can't play certain games. That's the same with people in our programs because they have the right to their housing and privacy. We don't get to go in there and tell them what they can and cannot do. They do have to pay their rent and they do have to meet with their case manager occasionally while they're in our programs. After they're done our programs, just like anyone else, they have to just make sure they pay their rent and their utilities, of course, and clean up their place and whatever rules the landlord actually has. So in some landlords have different rules where you can't have barbecues on balconies or something like that, or you can have pets or not pets. So the same rules apply to individuals that are experiencing homelessness that would apply to any one of us.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Thank you, Jamie.
going to speak a little bit about permanent supportive housing because I just made mention of it. Our permanent supportive housing, this is probably one of their biggest, I should have actually included this myth. Our permanent supportive housing is not a supported living environment in the way that it is health related. It is not a health model facility. This means that individuals in that property, in that building, have a lease agreement with actually the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society, with our department, our agency. It is private residence. There's just support offered 24/7 for individuals who want to access it. So can the program go in and enter those units at any time? No. They will be charged with break and enter. No different than I can barge into your home on a whim because I want to. That is individuals' private residence in that building. So we actually have to give a 24-hour notice to enter as the landlord. So there are rules. So people have this misconception that the PSH building and support workers can just go into people's units. They can't. They can't. That's an invasion of privacy. And it's break and enter, truly. I want to get that little girl up and get to practice her. Sorry, folks.
Thank you, Jamie. I have to leave. Bye.
Thanks, Judy. So folks, in closing, I just want to let everyone know that we are having our community celebration on July 16th. That's next Friday. You can go to our website to register. Our community celebration is our progress report to community. At I think 9:30, we'll be having our keynote address from Ian DeYoung with Orco Consulting, and I'll be presenting our year 11 progress report to community. And then we invite you to join us at Veterans Park. So we're across from City Hall at 11:30 a.m. for a come and go lunch. So this is, we're having a Shooting Star cater and have our favorite beef on a bun for everyone. So it's for community, it's for service participants. It's our good nod to well done community. So bring your children out. Again, it's come and go. If it's raining, we'll just serve it and people can go and enjoy. But feel free to hang around the park and talk to one of your homeless neighbors, perhaps, or not, and just have a conversation and get out and hang out in community a little bit. And we invite you to do that. So please register. With that, I'll say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for your questions. Hope you learned something new with this presentation, or that it actually prompts other questions, or hey, we need to go back and maybe have a different look at that. Again, cannot stress enough, if you don't know, just ask the question. We'll be more than willing to give you the factual response. Sometimes you'll be right, and sometimes you might just be a little bit more knowledgeable at the end of our conversation. Bye, folks.